Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses. Sorry, let me try that again. My goodness. This is Dr. Kate Walker. Welcome to your training for the day. I'm going to admit some folks from the waiting room. If I can get a drink of water here. All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to take you through how to ethically be a CE provider with all of the changes and everything that's come up. And I've got a few things to tell you first, and then of course I will open it up to questions because it is a lot different than it was a few years ago. So I was going through the rules just to make sure I kind of got my head straight about all this, because I'm going to cover about not only about being a provider, but also what's missing from the rules. And then I'm going to get into sort of the nuts and bolts of how to. So I kind of wanted to give you the bigger view, because I always want to give you ethics. I always want to let you know, the right and the wrong way to do it, what the board says we can do, what the board says we shouldn't do. But then I also know a lot of people are listening and watching today because they're like, okay, Kate, no, show me how to do it. So I want to make sure I cover that as well. So when you're thinking about becoming a CE provider, I think what was on everybody's mind, especially at the beginning of this year, was sort of this 50% rule. But I want to go beyond that, right? Because as I'm digging into the latest rules, which, by the way, that's March 2020, what year are we in? March 2024, the latest rules for LPC and LMFT. It basically says nothing about what you need to do to be a continuing education provider. So it's 681.140. And I know you're thinking, but wait a minute, in the 50% rule, it talks about all of these things like a hospital or an LPC supervisor, these types of, of course, the board is telling us what kind of provider we have to be. And those are types of providers. They are not approved providers. So the board will never maintain a list of continuing education providers or approved providers. Those are provider types. So the first thing to consider is, are you that type of provider? Well, even if you're not, you can still provide CEs. Okay, so if you have the expertise in an area and you are one of those provider types, then yay for you. You can actually provide one of those 50% types of CEs. But by no means should that stop you from providing a CE just because you are not a hospital or a national agency, or you work for an educational thing, or you don't have an S after your name. Now, if you do have an S after your LPC, then great. You can be one of those 50% folks. But when you dive into 681.140, you really don't see what else you must do as a provider. So for example, I pulled up the 2021 rules. And so this is LPC. I'm not screen sharing. So if you're listening to me on a replay, don't worry. I'm not sharing anything. But in 2021, we had 681.142, acceptable continuing education. I'm going to read verbatim. The continuing education must be related to counseling, period. So number one, the licensee must ensure the education provided is related to the practice of counseling. Number two, the licensee must ensure the individuals presenting the information have the necessary experience and knowledge in the topic presented. Number three, the presenter, this is the CE provider, right? This would be you, must verify attendance of participants and provides participants with a letter or certificate of attendance displaying the licensee's name, topic covered, date the course was taken, and hours of credit earned. Number four, the presenter, this would be you, must provide participants a mechanism for evaluation of each continuing education activity. So, it would be funny if somebody just listened to this much of the training and they're like, oh, good, that's what we have to do. Wrong. That's gone. All of that is missing. So when you go to the March rules, the latest rules of 2024, 681.140, all of that's gone. everything that has to do with taking attendance, having a roster, how long to keep the records, giving a quiz, verifying attendance. Well, I'll just tell you, all of this is gone. So the board now has no rules for the provider to do any of this. So, which kind of blew my mind last year when I attended a meeting where at the Texas Counseling Association, I believe that's where it was, where board members were talking over these changes. And I was like, hey, this is weird. Why don't we have to give quizzes anymore if we're providing online education? Or why are we not having to verify attendance? Or how come we don't have to? So, and basically their answer is they're getting out of the CE providing business. And their point is also, well taken, which is, they're never going to spend the time and the resources to audit providers. And I may be speaking out of turn here, so I love doing that because I know you guys will correct me. But that's the impression I got, after all of the changes, the sunset rules, the establishment of BHEC, and of course, we're going through a 4-year rule review soon. This is 2024 recording. They're not going to track all this stuff. So, if you've ever been in a training with me, I'm going to tell you what the rules say, and where the rules don't speak to it, we have to defer to best practices. So that would be our ACA Code of Ethics, APA Code of Ethics, whatever your license is, go to your organization, your professional organization Code of Ethics. And so just because it's not there anymore doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But this training today is about how to be a CE provider. So I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, you don't have to do anything. So now here's where it gets a little dicey, because in the wording for the latest rules, it does say verbiage like designate the number of hours. So let's go to the March rules. And no, I'm not screen sharing. I'm just going to go to, let's see, 681.41. I need hold music. Da, da, bum, bum. So 681. Almost there. What's great is when I put this in your profile, I'll be able to cut out all of this dead space. So some of the things you'll see in 681.140 requirements for continuing education are, things like a licensee may carry forward to the next renewal period a maximum of 10 hours accrued during the current renewal period if those hours are not needed. You're going to see things like the hours are 1-for-1. Well, how are you going to know that unless your continuing education provider has provided you with a certificate? So even though it says you as a CE provider don't have to provide a certificate any longer, your customer, right, the people who are going to be taking your CEs, they're going to be asked to show, were you a 50% type of provider? How many hours did they get? Well, they're not going to be able to give any evidence of that and upload it to the website if you haven't provided a certificate. So here we are in the first space where it says, even though the rules don't say we have to provide it, of course you're going to provide it, right? If you're going to give a live webinar or an online CE, you're going to make sure you give your participants, your customers, proof of the continuing education, proof of the number of hours. And since we all know as licensed people, we're going to have to also show proof of special topics. We have to show, if we have our S after our license, that we had 6 hours of supervision. We have to show that we have so many hours of multicultural or so many hours of human trafficking or whatever that is. So even though it says as a provider, we don't have to put things down like the topics, Of course, we're going to put down exactly what the topics are. And it doesn't tell us as providers how long to keep records, but we know in the rules it says in 681.14, licensees must keep the evidence of their continuing education for 3 years. So what kind of provider would you be if you did not also agree to keep records for 3 years? So when I'm talking to you about how to become a CE provider or how to provide CEs, it's like I'm almost teaching you how to position yourself as a really good provider. Because with this new sort of evolution of, I call it laissez-faire parenting, right? The board is taking their hands off of us, which is great. I love that. But they're going to hold licensees to the same standard. Okay, where's your certificate? Okay, how many hours did you get? Well, what topics were they? Were they 50% or just this other that doesn't have to be 50%? Oh, by the way, this was 2 years ago. Do you still have the certificate from 2 years ago? Well, you better contact your provider to see if they can give you a copy of the certificate, right? So even though the rules, it's blatantly missing as far as what we CE providers need to do. Of course, if you're doing a live webinar, you're going to take attendance. I know that when we provide CEs, live CEs, and in a couple of weeks, we're going to have 2 live CEs. And in each case, we have attendees fill out a Google form. But even more than that, we have the Zoom attendance. So whenever you record a meeting in Zoom or you host a meeting in Zoom, you can go into the back office and see exactly who logged in and for how long they stayed, and of course, technology, right? So if it kicked them out, but it kicked them back in, you know, if there's one person that just clicked in the last 10 minutes and they don't get a certificate, even though they filled out the form. So as this whole, I'm going to call it buyer beware, right? As people are going out and they're searching for good CEs and great CE providers, one of the things you can assure them of is you will take attendance. And however you want to do that, I mean, that's just the way we do it, right? And I like cameras on. So if you want attendance, if you want us to give you a certificate, in other words, people who buy our CEs aren't just buying a certificate, right? They're getting the assurance for the live webinar that we are taking attendance. We're also going to keep records. We're also going to make sure that we have the topic specified on the certificate. If it's ethics, we're going to call it ethics. If it's supervision, we're going to call it supervision. If it's LPC, LMFT, we're going to make sure that's on there because we know our consumers, our customers are going to need to provide that as proof. So that's sort of how I'm going to present kind of the making sure you provide CEs ethically, right? And we're deferring to best practices because, again, this whole section has been removed from the current LPC and LMFT rules. So I'm going to go ahead and move over then and sort of the nuts and bolts. How do you do it? Well, one of the things it talks about in the rules is this idea of 1-for-1. Well, that's super easy if you're doing a webinar, right? Well, 1 hour is 1 hour, great. Or the term is asynchronous, right? When you provide, let's say you teach this amazing course on, how to be a parent facilitator, and it's a 2-hour course, and you just videotape yourself, talking through your PowerPoint and giving the course, and that video is 2 hours long. Well, that's awesome too. We have 2-hour video, 2 hours of CE credit, right? Not 1 hour and 45 minutes of a video equals 2 hours, right? Not 1.5 hours of a video equals 2 hours. It has to be hour for hour. And so I know a lot of folks, they'll ask me about giving webinars. That's absolutely the easiest way, right? If you give a webinar and that webinar is going to be 1 hour long, and you can go into Zoom and you can take attendance, and then you can get people to click the link for the Google form so you can get certificates out efficiently. Excellent. That's absolutely the easiest way to go. Doing things asynchronously, That seems easy, but you have to be very, very careful, because you do want to make sure that that video, that asynchronous material is, if you say it's an hour, it's got to be an hour. I know for me, with a lot of our courses, if we get into sort of wonky numbers like, okay, this video is an hour and 20 minutes, then we have to come up with written content, right? And since the board doesn't speak to that, there's nothing in the LPC rules about written content and how long that has to be. We are also NBCC providers for asynchronous content, which means we uphold NBCC standards of 6,000 words equals 1 hour. I don't know how they came up with that number. I don't know, arbitrary. I don't know how many words I can read in an hour, but that's what we use for our content. So, for example, if I'm going to, record this little video today, and I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be a 25-minute video, then I'm going to, if I want this to be 1 hour of continuing education, then I'm going to come up with other things for my customer to read. Now, I don't want to go in and grade this, so I really do want it something that it's going to be very passive. So this can be my stuff, or this can be other people's stuff, right? So if this was on CEs and I knew that there was this great article that out there, it was about 6,000, let's say 3,000 words, and it was going to be a great addition to your information. I said, oh, this is great. I'm going to record this 30-minute video. I'm going to have 3,000 words, combine that together. That's an hour of material, but not according to LPC. Remember, they don't have anything written about that. But I defer to best practices for NBCC, and that gives that backs up what I'm saying. That says, okay, Kate Walker Training is going to provide a 30-minute CE, a video, a 30-minute of written content that the person's going to have to read and consume. And there you go, there's 1 hour. Now, we go the extra step. I still require a quiz because NBCC requires me to provide a quiz for asynchronous material. So again, if I'm going to package this training here today, I'm going to make it so that it's an hour. Well, in order for NBCC to give me the thumbs up, I have to provide 5 questions for every 1 hour of content. It doesn't tell me how rigorous those questions have to be. We prefer to do it as a no-fail. So if you get the answer wrong, you can go back and make sure you get it. And then at the end, if you pass the quiz, then the system delivers you a certificate in a perfect world. Sometimes we have technical glitches, but in a perfect world, that's what we do. So if you're providing your very own content, and you're doing this as an asynchronous CE, so that means you're going to provide a certificate at the end, it's important that you're using some kind of software so that you're not having to babysit and monitor. This is my personal preference. Who has purchased your course? Have they finished your course? And really, would you want to take a course if basically when you paid for it, you're just purchasing a certificate, right? For me, that's not a very rigorous course. I at least want some kind of a quiz, something at the end that'll say, hey, did I read the stuff? But LPC board does not specify that you would have to provide a quiz. So let me go back a second as far as the type of content. It can be a lot of work to produce your own content, right? So if you're going to write an article, you're going to write a 6,000 word article. So that's 1 hour. You're going to make an asynchronous CE. When they finish the article, they take 5-question quiz. If they pass the quiz, your system spits out a certificate that they can save, download, and they can show the board, if they get audited, that they took your course, passed your quiz, and got your CE for 1 hour off of the topic you specify. That's amazing. But a lot of us, we don't do that, right? We don't come up with just this stuff that is solely ours, because there's really nothing new out there, right? We're always researching, we're always learning. So if I see a great article, I want to make sure that I can include it as part of my asynchronous CE. But if it's other people's stuff, I can't restrict access to that, right? That would be like if I go steal your car and then I charge you to get in it, right? That's not fair. So even if I say, and I cite you and I say, yes, no, this is in fact your car. Nope, I'm going to charge you to use it, right? So I can cite all day long. I can give you a reference, but if you're providing an asynchronous CE with other people's stuff, so let's say you want people to go read the National Institute of Mental Health article on depression following COVID. Well, and then you're saying, okay, go read that. Well, you can always sell them the quiz, right? If you pass this quiz, then you will earn a CE from, me or whoever, you providing the asynchronous CE. But the important thing is you can't restrict access to other people's stuff. So for example, in my courses, what you'll see in our syllabus is a link. You'll see downloads. You'll see before you ever purchase the course, you can access every bit of material that doesn't belong to us, right? And we'll make a little statement there. We do not restrict access to anything that we haven't produced or researched, that doesn't belong to Kate Walker or, one of our researchers. So in that way, what we're saying is we're going to package all of that into a course you're going to love, and you'll have to pass a quiz. But if you want to just access the material and just for your own edification and you don't need the CE, well, here it is, right? We want to make sure that you have access to it because it's good stuff and it's going to make you a better counselor. So I wanted to, and then getting down to the nuts and bolts too, how to provide it. There are lots of different things you can use. Personally, I use a platform called Podia. I love Podia. I've used all kinds of things that are, like Teachable and Eduma. And I used, oh my gosh, I've used something as simple and free as Google's Flubaroo. And you can Google that. It's still out there. It's this Google app. And basically, it just allows you to create quizzes. And I've used quiz only. I've done things where you download from my website, and it was very, very arduous. So I would say, and I love to start this conversation, especially in the Step It Up membership, to kind of go back and forth about what works best is going to be based on how much can you babysit it, right? Because if you have the time to really monitor who's taken the course, did they pass your quiz? Did they earn a certificate? Do you need to send them the certificate? Oh, they didn't get the certificate. Now it's going to go back and forth, and you're going to have to make sure that. So having a course that you can basically put on autopilot, well, that's going to mean you want your software to have a few more bells and whistles. So what I wanted to cover today, and I am going to open it up for questions. I just want to make sure that you guys heard that although the 681.40 from, I had 2021 is, oh, now my computer's going crazy. Even though that's been removed, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because our customers, who really are also us, right? Our customers still need to show what type of provider you are, what you presented, the number of hours you presented, the topic. They need the proof in their hand, and they need to be able to hang on to that proof for 3 years. So you also must hang on to the proof for 3 years. As far as attendance and rosters and quizzes, and whether to use your content or other people's content, that's really up to you, because it's one of those things where are you wanting to provide very rigorous material? And I know the answer to this because you guys are awesome. You're not just selling a certificate, right? You're not just like, hey, click. Now, just give me my certificate and I'll read the stuff later, right? You have to decide what kind of provider you want to be. So, all right. And with that, I'm going to hit the pause on the recording and